Fairness is a story told to keep you obedient. Understand that sentence before we proceed. Not as provocation, not as bitter complaint, as a political observation stated with the same calm with which I once observed princes in their courts, cardinals in their palaces, soldiers in their encampments. Fairness is a story, and stories, even beautiful ones, are composed by those who benefit from their telling. The man who defines what is fair has already determined who wins. This is not philosophy. This is the mechanism of power, operating as it always has. In Florence 5 centuries past, and in your world today, you have been taught to play fair, to wait your turn, to follow the rules, to trust that the system, whatever system you inhabit, rewards the deserving and punishes the corrupt. You have been told this by teachers, by institutions, by those who shaped your understanding of how society functions. And you believed it. How most do, because the story is comfortable, and because questioning it requires a courage that is difficult to sustain when the cost of disbelief is the loss of hope itself. But discomfort is not the enemy. Illusion is. What I offer instead is the truth I gathered across decades of watching states form, collapse, and reform. I watched men of virtue destroyed by men of calculation. I watched the honest advisor dismissed, while the flattering liar was elevated. I watched talented soldiers left without command, while incompetent relatives of powerful men were given armies they could not lead. And I watched the same patterns repeat, not because the world was especially wicked in my time, but because power has a nature, that nature does not bend to moral expectation. It bends to force, to strategy, to the man who understands how it actually moves. I learned this in Florence. I served the Republic there with a devotion that cost me dearly. I was diplomat and civil servant, trusted with missions that required both intelligence and nerve. I met Cesare Borgia in the field and understood, from that encounter alone, more about how power truly operates than any text had previously taught me. Borgia was not a good man. He was not fair. He did not distribute mercy evenly or reward loyalty with the consistency fairness would demand. And yet, he moved through the Italian states like a force of nature, because he had grasped what I am about to tell you. The rules of power are not the rules you were given. They are the rules that the powerful actually follow, and those two sets of rules are not the same. When the Medici returned to Florence, I was dismissed, arrested, tortured, released and exiled to my small estate at Sant'Andrea in Percusina, where I tended to my farm by day and thought about everything I had seen by night. It was in that exile that I wrote, not to complain, not to moralize, but to understand, to strip away the comforting lies and examine the mechanism beneath. What I found was not darkness for its own sake. What I found was clarity. And clarity, even when it burns, is always preferable to the anesthetic of comfortable falsehood. The first truth is this: rules are written by the strong. They are enforced selectively, in the interest of those who wrote them, and rewritten whenever they no longer serve that interest. The law is a weapon. Like any weapon, it belongs most completely to whoever holds it most firmly. The man who does not understand this will stand before the law demanding justice and receive instead whatever the law's possessor has decided to give him. Consider the prince who inherits a state resting on his father's laws. Those laws were not composed in a spirit of abstract justice. They were composed to preserve the father's reign, protect his alliances, suppress his enemies, codify the advantages he had already seized. When the son enforces those laws, he is not enforcing justice. He is enforcing the legacy of power. The laws feel like truth because they have existed long enough to feel inevitable. But inevitability is an illusion conferred by time, not by justice. Republics do the same. The laws of any republic emerge from the dominant faction's interest. They are dressed in the language of common good and universal benefit because that language quiets dissent. But trace any law back to its origin and you will find not a philosopher but a faction. Not a judge but an interest. Not a principle but a calculation. Who benefits from this law? Who loses? The answers to those questions reveal more about the law's true nature than any examination of its stated purpose. To believe that the system is designed for your benefit, when you are not among those who designed it, is not virtue. It is naivety. and naivety in the arena of power is not protected by the gods. It is exploited by men. The meritocracy is the most dangerous fiction of your era. I say dangerous not because it is entirely false, but because it is partially true. And partial truths are far more effective instruments of control than outright lies. There is enough real meritocracy to sustain the belief. Some talented people do advance. Some honest labour does produce reward. These examples are real, and they are held up constantly, amplified, celebrated, made into narratives that convince you the system works as described. What you are not shown, with equal frequency, is the talented man passed over because he lacked alliance, the capable man dismissed because he disrupted the comfort of those above him, the diligent worker who accumulated 20 years of reliable service and was removed in a single afternoon when he became inconvenient. These examples are equally real, but they do not serve the narrative. They are absorbed quietly, individually, by those who experienced them. While the success stories are broadcast widely as proof of the system's fairness. What I am describing is not a lesson for the cynical alone. It is a lesson for anyone who has ever been outmaneuvered by someone less capable. Anyone who has worked faithfully and watched a lesser man advance past him. Anyone who has followed the process precisely and found the outcome decided by factors the process never mentioned. These are not the wounds of an unlucky few. They are the common experience of men who trusted the official account of how power distributes itself. The official account says, work hard, demonstrate your value, follow the guidelines. The actual account says, cultivate the right relationships, be visible to the right people, manage the perceptions of those who control your advancement. These are not the same instructions. The first is what institutions display. The second is what institutions practice. The man who acts on the first and is then surprised by the second has not been betrayed by a corrupt system. He has been surprised by a system that was always this way, and whose actual rules were available to those willing to observe carefully rather than believe conveniently. Men are judged by results in proportion to how well positioned they are to be judged. A result produced in obscurity carries little weight. The same result produced by a man who is visible, trusted, and associated with success. That result is amplified. It confirms what was already believed. And what is already believed about you is determined not by your intentions, but by the impressions you have allowed or failed to create. This is why reputation management is not vanity. It is arithmetic. The man who produces excellent results from a position of low visibility and poor association will be consistently undervalued. The man who produces adequate results from a position of high visibility and strong association will be consistently overvalued. The world does not respond to what you are. It responds to what you appear to be, filtered through the pre-existing beliefs of those with the power to respond. To ignore this is not humility. It is surrender. Perception is the medium through which all real-world judgments are transmitted. You may possess every quality required for the position you seek, but if those qualities are not perceived by those who make the decision, they do not exist in the only arena that matters, the arena of consequence. I have seen princes of genuine ability destroyed by the management of perception in their enemies' hands. I have seen men of ordinary capability elevated by the careful management of their own image. The principle is reliable. Power responds to what is seen, not to what is deserved. The man who accepts this and acts accordingly has not compromised his integrity. He has added a skill. He has added the skill of making visible what is already real, ensuring that what he is capable of is also what those with power understand him to be capable of. This is communication, not deception. It is the translation of real value into the language of perception, as essential as the value itself. I observed this same mechanism in the courts of my time. The court rewarded performance, and yes, but it rewarded performance as seen and judged by those in power. And men in power have a particular vision. They see most clearly the talents that make them look good. They are remarkably blind to the talents that might replace them or challenge their judgment. Merit operates in the court, but filtered through the preferences, the anxieties, and the interests of those who control advancement. To succeed on merit alone, without understanding this filter, is to rely on fortune rather than strategy. and I have never advised reliance on fortune when calculation is available. Your modern institutions are courts. Every hierarchy is a court. The corporation with its tiers of management, the profession with its gatekeepers and networks. These are courts in modern dress. They have the language of objectivity. Assessments, metrics, reviews, qualifications. But beneath that language, the same dynamics operate. Whose advancement serves the interests of those already advanced? Who threatens the established order, and how quietly can that threat be neutralized? The man who succeeds reliably is not the man who works hardest in isolation. He is the man who works hard, visibly, in ways that benefit those above him, while managing his relationships with the care of a diplomat. He understands that the evaluation of his work is never purely objective. It passes through human judgment shaped by familiarity, by comfort, by association. He does not leave that judgment to chance. He is strategic, and his strategy is not dishonesty. It is competence in the full scope of what the environment actually demands, rather than only the portion the official rules acknowledge. And now I will address the question already forming. Is this not manipulation? Manipulation is the use of deception to move people against their interests. What I describe is different. I describe the navigation of the real rules by which an environment operates. I describe the replacement of naivety with clarity. A soldier who learns the terrain of the battlefield is not manipulating the landscape. He is being competent within a reality that exists whether or not he acknowledges it. The moral question is not whether to understand the rules. The moral question is what you do once you understand them. Every environment has its formal rules and its operating rules. The formal rules are written down and serve as the official account of how the system functions. The operating rules are unspoken, enforced constantly. They are understood by anyone who has spent sufficient time inside the system. These two sets of rules frequently conflict. When they conflict, the operating rules win. The man who follows only the formal rules in an environment where operating rules dominate will find himself out-competed by men, less formally virtuous but more practically competent. He will lose opportunities to people he considers less deserving. He will watch the advancement of colleagues whose work is inferior, but whose navigation of the unspoken system is superior. And he will have two choices: retreat into bitterness, clutching his integrity as consolation for defeat, or learn the operating rules and use that understanding to achieve what he actually wants. Neither option is free of cost. The first costs advancement and influence. The second costs a certain innocence. I do not tell you which to choose. I tell you what the choice actually is. Because many men never see it clearly. They lose the game without knowing what game was being played. The intelligent man makes the choice deliberately. He decides what he will and will not do, where his actual ethical lines are, rather than his performative ones, and acts with full knowledge of what he is choosing. That is not moral abandonment. That is moral clarity, rarer and more demanding than moral comfort. Follow the rules when they serve your interests, when the cost of breaking them exceeds the benefit, when they represent genuine constraints that will be enforced against you specifically. Not because rules are sacred, because calculation recommends it. Bend the rules when the operating culture of your environment permits it, when the advantage gained outweighs the risk of exposure, when the bending can be dressed in the language of formal compliance if examined. Because the environment you are navigating treats rule bending as the norm, practiced quietly by nearly everyone who advances, prosecuted only when politically useful. I watched Cesare Borgia operate in this grey zone with mastery I have never seen equal. He understood precisely which laws he could disregard, which alliances gave him cover, which enemies were vulnerable. He moved through the grey zone like a man reading a map others could not see. And that map was the real map of power, not the decorative one displayed in official chambers. In your world, this map exists in every institute. In the professional hierarchy, it shows who is truly protected and who is merely employed. And it shows which policies exist to constrain behavior and which exist to be cited after the fact as justification for decisions already made on other grounds. The man who reads this map is not always the most qualified, but he is nearly always the one who advances. In commercial dealings, it shows which agreements will be honoured fully and which will be honoured only as long as it serves the dominant party. Every contract is the official representation of an agreement, but contracts are enforced only when enforcement serves someone's interest. The party with more resources and more capacity to sustain pressure has a different relationship to the same contract. The wise man knows this before he signs. Now I turn to self-protection. Recognition of an unfair system is not sufficient. A recognition without strategy is merely suffering with greater clarity. The first principle: never anchor your security to the system's promises. Any organization that has told you loyalty will be rewarded, that good work will be recognized, that the process is fair. Understand that these statements reflect the system's self-interest in your continued compliance, not its commitment to your welfare. The moment your continued presence serves the system's interests less than your removal would, the promises evaporate. They were never contracts. They were inducements. Maintain parallel paths. Serve your institution with competence, but cultivate your external reputation simultaneously. Build skills that the broader world recognizes. Maintain relationships outside your immediate hierarchy. Be loyal to results, not to institutions, because institutions are loyal only to their own survival. The second principle: understand who has real power versus performed authority. The man with the title is visible, but real power resides in the person whose removal would damage the system, the one who holds the critical relationships, who possesses irreplaceable knowledge, who is trusted by the true decision-makers. This person may have a modest title or none at all. Identify him. Treat him with the respect his real power deserves, not the respect his formal position suggests. The third principle: control what information you reveal and to whom. In the courts of Florence, men were destroyed by information they provided voluntarily. Confessions made under the assumption of trust. Plans shared in the belief that the listener was an ally. And vulnerabilities disclosed in moments of proximity and used against them at moments of distance. Information is currency. Currency flows toward those with more power to use it. When a weaker man gives information to a stronger one, the transfer benefits the stronger. The man who understands this does not become silent or paranoid. He becomes precise. He shares what it serves his interest to share and guards what it serves his interest to guard. Candor in an environment where information is leveraged is not a virtue. It is a vulnerability, unless deployed strategically. The fourth principle: manage your reputation with the attention a commander gives to his strategic reserves. A good reputation creates trust before you enter a room. It creates benefit of the doubt when your conduct is questioned. It is extraordinarily difficult to build and extraordinarily easy to damage. Your enemies know this. Their most efficient instrument against you is not confrontation. It is the careful placement of doubt, a question asked in the right ear, an account of your conduct framed selectively. To protect yourself, build the reputation with enough consistency that a single accusation cannot collapse it. Construct quietly the relationships and the record that make your adversary's narrative implausible before he deploys it. The fifth principle: never rely on a single patron. The man who has risen through one powerful person's favor is entirely dependent on the continuation of that favor. The patron may die, be displaced, lose interest. Each of these possibilities, none requiring any fault on your part, can end your position entirely. The man valued by several sources of power simultaneously is far more secure. In Florence, I watched men of considerable ability fall entirely when their primary patron was removed, not because they had done anything wrong, but because they had anchored everything to a single relationship that dissolved. I made my own version of this error, trusting the Republic itself would protect its servants. When the Medici returned, the institution I had served offered no protection at all. My service, my competence, my years of reliable work, none of these mattered. What mattered was that I was associated with the old order. The institution does not protect you. The only reliable protection is the combination of real value, multiple relationships, visible reputation, and strategic positioning that makes your removal costly enough that those who might remove you calculate it is not worth doing. Make yourself costly to remove. Make your knowledge valuable and not easily transferable. Make your relationships beneficial to those above you. Make your reputation such that damaging it carries consequences for those who attempt it. The man who has done these things is not invulnerable. Nothing in human affairs is invulnerable, but he is protected against the casual dismissal, the opportunistic betrayal, the quiet displacement that claims men who made themselves easy to remove. Now, I must address the seduction of total ruthlessness. There are men who learn what I have described and conclude that all ethics are performance, that every relationship is purely instrumental, so that since the system is unfair, they are released from all obligation. These men are mistaken, not because their conclusion is morally repugnant, though it is, but because it is strategically incorrect. The purely instrumental man is found out. Not always, not immediately, but in time. His relationships lack the quality of genuine mutual investment, and people feel the absence of that quality even when they cannot name it. The man who treats every person only as a tool eventually exhausts his supply of people willing to be used and finds himself isolated at exactly the moment when isolation is most costly. The wise strategist is not cynical. He is clear-eyed. He sees that genuine alliances built on real mutual respect are more durable and therefore more valuable than purely transactional ones. And he has shed the illusions, fairness as an automatic property of systems, merit as sufficient for advancement, loyalty as reliable protection. But he has not shed everything. He knows where to build genuinely, and he builds there with full attention. One of the errors I see most clearly is the error of premature action. Men understand the system is not fair. They understand operating rules differ from official ones, and immediately they begin operating according to operating rules, openly, before they have established the position that would make such operations survivable. They announce their understanding of the real game before they are strong enough to play it. The man who bends rules before he is powerful enough to withstand the consequences of being caught has simply exposed himself at maximum vulnerability. Understanding the terrain is necessary, but not sufficient. You must have the forces, the position, the alliances, and the timing required to act effectively. Patience is not passivity. It is the management of timing. Borgia appeared, to those observing the surface, to act with sudden decisiveness. But I saw the preparation behind those moments. The alliances cultivated, the information gathered, the moment chosen only when the factors were arranged as favourably as calculation could arrange them. Do not act until you are ready to absorb the consequences of acting. Do not reveal that you are preparing. Preparation conducted visibly is preparation conducted poorly. Freedom from unfairness is not a posture. It is built slowly through the accumulation of real alternatives, skills, resources, relationships, a reputation that make the system's threats less decisive. The man who has alternatives can afford to decline what is offered. The man without alternatives accepts what he is given, regardless of what he says about it. Build alternatives. Quietly, continuously. Let the system believe you are dependent upon it, while you reduce your dependence with every passing month. When you are strong enough to act with the full force of your preparation, without announcement, without theatrical declaration, with the quiet finality of a man who is prepared for precisely this moment. The man who plays the official game, following the rules as stated, trusting the process as presented, waiting for the system to recognize his merit, is not more ethical than the strategist. He is less prepared. And when the system discards him, as systems discard those who are no longer useful, he will have no one to blame but the story he chose to believe, instead of the reality he chose not to see. I spent years in exile, years during which men less capable than I occupied positions I had prepared for. I could have been consumed by bitterness. Many are. Instead, I thought, I wrote, I extracted from experience and from history the mechanisms that produce success and failure in the arena of power. What I found was not a moral lesson about the triumph of virtue. It was a map. Precise, cold, accurate. You are holding that map now. You may fold it away and return to the story you were given. The story is comfortable. It requires nothing except compliance. And compliance has its rewards, a certain safety, a certain peace, the approval of those who benefit from your belief in the story. Or you may read the map. Reading it will cost you something. It will cost you the comfort of believing the world owes you recognition for your virtue. It will cost you the peace of not seeing what is happening in the rooms where decisions are made. It will cost you an innocence that, once lost, cannot be recovered, but it will give you something of more practical value than any of these things. It will give you clarity, and from clarity comes the capacity to act effectively, to protect yourself where you are vulnerable, to advance where advancement is possible, to choose your battles with full knowledge of what you are actually fighting. The rules were not written for you, but the game is still being played. The only question is whether you will play it as it is, or as you were told it was. You may obey the rules. Others will use them. The choice will be made regardless of whether you make it deliberately. Power does not pause for moral deliberation. The man who has not decided what he believes about how the world works will have that decision made for him by those who decided long ago. Decide, and then act accordingly.